Marc-Andre Fleury had himself a night as the Minnesota Wild pick up another win over the Montreal Canadiens by a score of 4-1. We recap it for you on today's Locked On Wild Postcast.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, your team every day.
The Minnesota Wild pick up a win 4-1 over the Montreal Canadiens, and we are recapping it for you on tonight's Locked On Wild Postcast. We're joined by phone by Kevin Gorg. And Kevin, long road trip in the books. The Wild, I think, really highlight it by picking up a win against Chicago and some injuries, more injuries tonight, as we'll talk about in a little bit. But all in all, the Wild figured some things out, and Marc-Andre Fleury being on his A game certainly did a lot to get them to the win tonight.
Yeah, you make a great point, Seth. You know, they rode Marc-Andre Fleury early. They clearly didn't have their legs, and it's something that every team worries about. But when you're away for that long, that first home game back can be a bit of a pitfall, and it certainly looked like it was. But Fleury stopped a bunch of shots in the first period. I believe Montreal ended up with 15 shots on goal in the first frame. And then Minnesota really found something in period two. They finally got to the forecheck. If you get the puck in the zone against Montreal, you can beat their defenders down low. They started to do that. And then they got Kirill Kaprizov going, and they rode that nice 3-0 lead into the third. And Marc-Andre Fleury, I thought, again in the third period, was outstanding at critical moments. He has absolutely found his form. He's playing great, and I feel like the team is kind of feeding right off him.
And it's such a luxury for a team to have when you're trying to figure some things out. The Wild were trying to get line combinations figured out early in the game, and he bought the Wild enough time to be able to get some things figured out there in the second period. And we can look at those first couple of starts of the season now as an anomaly because we've seen him stack quality start after quality start back to back to back here.
Yeah, it all started in that home game to end that 4-game homestand against Vancouver. And, you know, he mentioned in our post-game interview that he finally started to feel halfway decent in that game, made a couple of giant saves when Vancouver could have put that game away in the third period and they had a 1-goal lead. And then talking to Freddie Chabot, the goaltending coach on the last road trip, there were a couple of sequences at practice where Marc-Andre Fleury, after he got off the ice, would sit down and watch video with the goaltending coach for 15 or 20 minutes. And I asked Freddie about that, and he said he's still trying to figure out some of the tendencies of the D-men in front of him. Remember, he didn't play here that long last year. It was all kind of a blur, I think, and they got to the playoffs, and that series, of course, didn't go well against St. Louis. And now you've got Calen Addison in the mix, who is new to Marc-Andre Fleury, and he's talked about how important it is to have that chemistry between the defenseman and the goalie, and it's an ongoing process, but clearly that video work is paying off. He looks like a different goalie. And I think his game has been building. I think on the road trip, it got real good, and it kind of came to a crescendo tonight, and that's huge for the Minnesota Wild.
A couple of youngsters that factored into the scoring here tonight. We saw Mason Shaw get his second goal of the season, and at this point, it sounds like there are going to be some roster moves made before heading out on the road next week, just with the duration of injury for a couple of guys. And I would expect that Mason Shaw is going to factor in to one of those guys that sticks with the team. He's just been sensational since he was called up.
Let's put it this way. They've got 4 forwards out right now, so their hands are kind of tied in terms of where Shaw is going to go. Doesn't matter. If they were healthy right now, there's no way he isn't playing for the Minnesota Wild. The game he's put together now consecutively, I think now for the better part of 10 days, is the type of game that keeps you in the National Hockey League. Not just the goals he's scoring, it's the details into his game. He's winning puck battles on the wall. He's making great entry plays into the zone. He's sustaining forechecks, standing up for teammates, dropping the mitts. I mean, this guy is beloved in the locker room. The coaches also have that adoration for him. It's a tremendous story what this kid's overcome. And he's the type of guy, too, that knows this is a huge opportunity in his career. It's kind of a really big turning point in his career. And this might be something where we see Mason Shaw in a Wild sweater for a long, long time. He's doing too many things too well, but no question, the undercurrent to all this conversation is already missing Greenway. and Foligno and Hartman, now Duhaime goes, you're not only missing great hockey players, but you're missing that sandpaper. So the fact that Shaw plays that way is only going to enhance his role.
You mentioned sticking up for teammates because Marco Rossi had what was a clean hit at the end of the game that the Canadians took exception to. But earlier in the game, we thought Rossi had his first goal of the year, at least Joe O'Donnell did on the radio call. Had a chance to listen to most of that here out on the road tonight. But Rossi does end up getting his first career NHL point on an assist off of that goal that went to Kirill Kaprizov. And you look at what he did from that point to the end of the game, it seemed like there was a little bit of kind of just gripping the stick a little too tight. Once he got that first point, it seemed like it really put him at ease.
Yeah, I think you're right. He had a big smile on his face. We interviewed him on TV in the second intermission, and I asked him what it was like to have to wait for that goal to be reviewed. And he said he was praying. He just wanted to get that monkey off his back. And I think now he can get back to just playing the game. And it'll be helpful at some point if he can get that first goal. We've seen it with Mason Shaw. You know, here's a kid that just scored his first goal in the National Hockey League, but they kind of come in bunches for these guys. And you know that Marco Rossi, being a high-end draft pick and all the conversation around the skill he possesses, seeing that he put up 53 points in 63 games with the Iowa Wild last year, he's putting pressure on himself. He doesn't need to do that, but he is. He cares. He wants to help his team. He wants to put up some points. This one might really help him kind of just take a deep breath and just get back to what he does. He's always going to be a guy that gets a lot more assists than he gets goals. He's a playmaker. And on that goal that was reviewed, he batted the puck out of midair, got it across the Kirill Kaprizov. They both took a swipe at it. Kaprizov actually is the one that knocked it in the net. But the bottom line is you see that this guy's got unbelievable rink awareness, great passer of the puck, and his best days are still way in front of him.
And just the final thing before we kind of take a look ahead to Seattle on Thursday, as well as some of the injuries that the team is dealing with. Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy, that just you want to see your two superstar players really lead the charge when players are out of the lineup. And those guys just continue to do it every night.
They really do. And, you know, for Wild fans, it's a treat because Kirill Kaprizov is the superstar we were waiting for. He's the best and most talented player to ever wear a Wild sweater. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you look at where we're going here, Kaprizov already had played pro hockey. He's in his mid-20s, and he still, I think, had upside. But you want to talk about upside. Matt Boldy's 21 years old. He could still be playing college hockey. He started in the National Hockey League less than a calendar year ago. That includes the summer vacation. And now you're seeing this kid's game go to the next level. We saw him last year. I think he was one of the biggest factors in what Kevin Fiala did. But I'm going to tell you, this Matt Boldy guy, it's not out of the realm of possibility before his Wild career is done that he's a perennial 40-goal scorer every year. He is such a talented hockey player. He's already got, 6 goals on the season this year. And that power play with him and Kaprizov and Zuccarello out there is magic. And there's a reason Dean Evison keeps him out there for 90% of the 2 minutes every time the Wild get the extra man. And Matt Boldy is a big part of that.
Minnesota Wilds pick up the win against Montreal 4-1. They are now 5-4-1 on the season, with Seattle coming up on Thursday. We'll talk about the Seattle Kraken as well as the injury situation for the Wild as we continue today's Locked On Wild postcast. But first, a word from our sponsors. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to take a listen. Right now, Locked On Wild listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, so you don't want to miss out. And whether you are a longtime homeowner looking to up your ease of mind or a first-time home buyer trying to give yourself security when you're at home or not, Simply Safe can do that for you. You can take advantage of their 24/7 professional monitoring using Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify that a threat is real so you get priority police response. SimpliSafe is a whole home security system with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnNHL today. This is the biggest discount of the year, so don't miss out. That's simplysafe.com/LockedOnNHL. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Minnesota Wild beat the Montreal Canadiens 4-1. Our Locked On Wild postcast continues. Seth Topol joined by Kevin Gorg. And Kevin, Brandon Duhaime left this game, which, as you alluded to, leaves us without Jordan Greenway, Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, and now Brandon Duhaime. Sounds like it may be on the longer end for Hartman, but still really no word as to what sort of timetable Marcus Foligno is dealing with.
Yeah, Dean Evison this morning, when he was asked about that after morning skate, hinted that he likely won't play in the next game, which is the Seattle game you referenced on Thursday. But there was a chance, at least in his mind, that maybe sometime next week he might get back with the club, maybe on that road trip through California. The great news for Minnesota, and there's not a lot of great news when you're missing four very important players, but the games are very spread out right now. They played tonight, they play Thursday, and then they really don't get going again until next week. They've got the weekend off, and it's a West Coast trip, but they're going to play 3 games next week. And none of them are going to be world beaters that they're going to face on that trip. So you can piece some things together. You've got some young, hungry players that are willing and ready to contribute. We talked about Mason Shaw. I thought Stephen Fogarty didn't play a ton tonight, but I thought he played well when he did. He's a guy that played high school hockey at Edina, and he's played 30 roughly NHL games. The first time he got to play in front of his home fans for the team he grew up watching. And you look at, Connor Dewar and the way he's been playing terrific lately, great on the penalty kill. And, there's a lot of young guys on this roster right now, and I think you might see some more come up from the Iowa Wild that are ready to give this team a shot in the arm. Dean Evison talked about it after training camp, Seth. They are a deep organization right now that will be tested because of who they're missing, but it's not a bad time to go through it. We're early in the year, and the games right now are a little bit spread out.
Seattle coming in on Thursday, and the Kraken are an exciting young team, but they are a young team at that. And so another opportunity for this Wild team to see some exciting young players. But much like the Montreal Canadiens, it's a situation that I view them as a team on the right track, but a team that's not quite there yet.
Oh, they're going to get there. They've got, as you mentioned, some very good and skilled players. Dave Haxtell is a coach behind the bench that Minnesota hockey fans are very familiar with, going back to those Gopher, North Dakota games of years gone by. One thing, when you play a team coached by Dave Haxtell, is they're going to play with a lot of passion and a lot of real grit involved in their game. They're going to have some push. And so for Minnesota, I think a lot like you saw tonight, they're going to have to play a stout game defensively, and they're going to have to wait for their opportunities, because against a team like Seattle, if you can get them in the defensive zone, at some point they're going to break down. And as tough as these injuries are to overcome, you can keep these 3 players healthy. Kaprizov, Boldy, and Zuccarello. You're going to be able to win games because you've got your top line intact and you've got a power play that can win you hockey games. And right now they're going to have to rely on those guys big time.
The Wild certainly trying to continue what has been a nice stretch for them. But as you alluded to, if those top 3 guys stay healthy, they've got a chance every night. And we'll hope to see another win for the Wild against the Kraken on Thursday. Kevin, thank you for joining for yet another Locked On Wild postcast. Listeners, make sure you are following along with Locked On Wild so you don't miss out on any of our great content throughout the week. We've got new episodes every Monday through Friday to keep you up to date as part of the Locked On Sports Podcast Network.